I'm Robin from CookingMexicanRecipes.com, and today I am making a delicious dessert recipe called flan, sometimes pronounced flan. Now, if you haven't had this before, this is basically a egg-based custard which is topped with a nice caramel sauce. Before we start our recipe, let's talk about how we're going to serve this up. Now, I'm going to make it today in these ramekins. Now, these ramekins are oven-proof, and that's the key thing. I've got 6 of them here, which will work out nicely for my recipe. And we're going to fill them up with custard up probably to the top, and then we're going to cook it in this other, I have a 9 by 13 dish here. And we're going to fill that up with water and cook it as a bain-marie, which is basically a water bath. And what that does is it slows down the cooking and insulates the custard so it cooks very slowly. The other option is to use a regular glass pie plate that can go in the oven. And if you want to just make one big serving like that, just make sure that you have a dish large enough to hold it so we can get water in there. And again, we'll fill the water up at least halfway on your dish. So the first thing we want to do before we start our caramel syrup part of this recipe is I want to fill up your teapot or a pot with some nice hot water, because we're going to use that. We need it to be hot for the bain-marie. So we'll get that going. I have my water in there. I'm going to turn on the flame and have that nice and hot. The next thing we want to do is when we caramelize, or I melt the sugar in the pan and it becomes a liquid, we're going to pour it into the ramekins, and it's going to want to harden up very quickly. So we have to sort of twirl it like this and try and get it all around the glass. So what I'm going to do to help with that is I'm going to heat these up in the oven before that point at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And that way I'll bring them out and I can still handle them, and then I can help twirl it, and that'll help lengthen the time that I have to get that syrup around the glass. So I'm going to go ahead and heat these up. While my ramekins are heating up in the oven, let's start our sugar process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this into my pan and turn the heat on medium low. Now we're going to want to stir this constantly so that it doesn't burn. All right, so you want to stir this as it's cooking. You can see where it's starting to get a little liquidy. Okay, so it's really starting to get a little chunky, and you can see it's starting to get more liquidy. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and take out the ramekins from the oven that are being warmed right now and set them right next to me. So now you can see we're really getting nice and liquidy here. We've still got some chunks, and we've got to get all of this dissolved. So we're going to keep stirring until it's all dissolved in, and then I'll pour it into the ramekins. All right, so now our mixture looks like it's just about ready to go. You see the nice amber brownish color? That's what we're looking for, and we don't want to burn it. So I'm going to start pouring it in and then swirling it around. So I'm going to pour a little bit into each one, like that. I'm going to do those 3, and then you pick them up and you rotate them around like this. Before it gets too hard, you can see you want to get it covered as much as possible. While we're waiting for our caramel syrup to harden, I'm going to go ahead and mix up the custard ingredients to add to it. So we're going to start off with 3 eggs. I'm going to add 3 eggs to the bowl. And to the eggs, I'm going to add a teaspoon of real vanilla. All right, we got that. And then I'm going to add just half a teaspoon of, this is almond extract. I don't want it to overpower, so I'm just doing a half a teaspoon. And we're going to mix that up with a whip to get this nice and blended. Now I'm going to add some evaporated skim milk. So you got to shake it up first before you pour it in. And then I have 1 can of sweetened condensed milk, so we're going to add that in. And this is a lot thicker, so we're going to want to make sure we blend it in well. So we're going to combine this really well, and then I'm going to pour it through a sieve or a strainer into another dish. And the reason I do that is so that I make this custard, it'll make this custard really, really smooth, because a lot of times the egg will have, a little bit of clumps. So I'm going to pour this through here into another dish. And you can see here some of the little clumps that we're going to get out. Okay, so now it's time to pour the custard into the cups. Now, I still have to add water to my 9x13 dish, but it's going to be very difficult to carry. So I'm going to just set it in with just the custard into the oven, and I'm going to leave it hang out just a little bit so I can get my teapot in there, and I'm going to remove one of these so I have room to pour in my hot water. I'm going to add the other one back in, and I might still add just a little bit more hot water. And we're going to cook that. We're going to cook it for 40 minutes and we're going to check it after that. Okay, I checked the custard at about 40 minutes and it was definitely not done. Now, ovens do vary, so that's why I want you to check it at 40. Your oven may be a lot hotter. So, and now I've gone in for another 15 minutes, so we'll have a look. And you can tell by when I move that, they don't jiggle too much, and I'm going to stick a knife in. And it came out pretty clean, so I'm going to pull these out. So we're going to let these sit here and cool for a bit. I'm going to remove them from the water bath so that they cool off even faster. And then I'm going to, when they're cool enough to go in the fridge, we're going to put them in there for at least 2 hours before you serve them. Okay, so now we're ready to serve our flan. So the best way to do this is to take a knife, because it's going to stick to the edges, and go around the outside of your flan like this to loosen it. Okay, and when you feel it, it's pretty much let go. Now it's time. So you want to put a plate, whatever you have, on top, and it has a lip on it so that the juices will stay in, and then just flip it over. Now, it doesn't always come loose on that first try, and it's not here. I'm trying to wiggle it a little bit. Here it goes. Okay. Now you can see how the caramel sauce just flows right down, and that's exactly what you want. Scrape a little bit more of it out of there. Some of it's stuck to the bottom, and that's okay. So there you have it, some nice delicious flan. I'm going to take a little taste out of this. Dip it into a little sauce. It's very smooth, very creamy. You're going to love this. So give it a try and see how you like it, and leave me a comment. And be sure and stop by my website at cookingmexicanrecipes.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by.